Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel for a video I have been so excited to film for weeks and weeks, if not months now, which is, of course, as you know from the title, my most anticipated new book releases of 2022. Yes, we're talking about books coming out in 2022. Honestly, it's hard to conceive of as a reader, but like as an author, it also feels so impending because I have a book which I'm actually contracted to write which comes out in 2023, so like what is even 2022? But that's the year we're here to talk about. I am obviously going to be talking about all the books coming out next year, which I currently am aware of, that I'm super excited for, and share them with you in this video because I think you might be excited for them too. Before we do jump in to the books I'm excited about though, we do have a little haul to look at, courtesy of the sponsor of today's video, so allow me to put my coffee down. In this box I have a super exciting stack of books courtesy of Book of the Month. So if you're not aware, Book of the Month is a monthly book subscription service where you can sign up and receive one book every month with options to add additional books to your haul, but you also are able to pick which book from a selection of special editions that you do receive that month. So unlike a lot of other subscription services, you're not bound to one specific book, and if you do have all of the books already that month or aren't interested in any of the books that month, you can skip a month and save up your credits for the next again. But for those of you interested, I wanted to share with you everything that is available to December subscribers in case you'd like to check them out. Now when you receive your subscription, your boxes will come in these lovely little blue boxes, and then inside that box you will receive one of these absolutely gorgeous Book of the Month books. So let's have a look at what's available in December. So first up we have a novel, Olga Dies Dreaming by Zojito Gonzalez, and this one sounds super fascinating. It's about two siblings who live pretty high-powered lives. The brother is actually a politician and the sister owns her own company, but of course their lives aren't quite as rosy or as picturesque as they seem on the outside. They have a lot of family history and family secrecy that has been bubbling up within their lives, ignored, and they're forced to confront through the events of this book. We then have something particularly suitable for this time of the year, which is The Holiday Swap by Maggie Knox, and this is of course a Christmassy holiday romance. This is actually about two twins who have to swap places, and of course their lives turn out very differently when they occupy the others. I really love the kind of like look-alike swap trope, so I'm looking forward to this. Then we have A Flicker in the Dark, which is a thriller about Chloe, who when she was a teenager, a group of young girls went missing and her father was accused of being involved in their disappearance. It's now the future and she is a psychologist with her own life, but girls start go missing again, so ends up being dragged into this whole mystery once more. Then we have A History of Wild Places by Shay Earnshaw, which sounds like a combination of dark, spooky fairy tale and mystery. It's about a man who is sent to look for someone who's gone missing and ends up finding them in this commune, but then goes missing themselves. Then a few years later, a member of this commune finds the missing truck of the man who came to look for them, and it's all about the secrets unraveling and whether there's something a little bit like more mysterious and maybe fantastical at play. Lastly, for the December picks themselves, we have Somebody's Daughter, a memoir by Ashley C. Ford, which is obviously non-fiction, and this one in particular is all about Ashley's relationship with her father, who has been in prison her whole life, but when she is younger she has no idea why he's in prison, so it's sort of straddling that desire to know him but also know what he did and find her place in her family through like trauma and poverty and all of the upheaval that she has experienced. Like I mentioned, you can add on books though every month to your subscription, and in December Book of the Month do have gorgeous editions of The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green. I'm a big John Green fan. He is one of the OG YouTubers that got me into YouTube myself. I love his books. He even helped me get back into reading years and years and years ago, so I'm always super excited to have new John Green on my shelf. So naturally I'm pretty thrilled to have a stack of super exciting books courtesy of Book of the Month. Thank you so much to them for sending these over and also sponsoring and supporting this channel. It's a massive help. If you would like to check them out, they will be linked in the description box down below. Plus, if you're a new subscriber, you can actually use the code JOLLY throughout the month of December to get your first box for only $5. which is so much less than most of these books would have retailed for. So, you know, why not treat yourself? It is the holiday season after all, or perhaps treat somebody you know. I do think this subscription service would also make a lovely gift. But without further ado, let's crack on with the books I cannot wait to come out in 2022. So these books are in no particular order, but I will let you know what their UK release date is according to Amazon. Of course, that is subject to change, but for now, that is my source, and I will be glancing at my phone to double check things. So first up, we have Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher. So this is the latest fantastical horror novel by T. Kingfisher, who's one of my favourite authors. I first got into her writing through her fairy tale retellings, which always had a slightly dark atmosphere that I loved. Then she started writing straight up fantastical horror, and I was in love. I absolutely love her writing when it comes to this subgenre. It's so captivating, so naturally I'm super excited for her latest release in this genre. And even more exciting is that this is like full-blown high fantasy as opposed to her other fantasy horror, which has been set in our contemporary world, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see how she melds all those things together. In this novel, we follow a sister who has been raised in a convent, but her other sister, naturally she has to have a sibling if she's a sister. Her sister has been in the hands of the prince of their world, and it's a very abusive relationship. So our convent-raised sister sets out to save her abused sister and seeks out the help of a grave witch to help her kill him. It sounds fantastic, really, really interesting, and I'm always up for trying anything that T. Kingfisher writes. And that comes out on April 26th. So my next book is a little bit of a self-plug, but you know, I'm super excited for it to come out naturally, and that is my new children's book, which comes out on August 4th, 2022, called Egyptian Myths Meet the Gods, Goddesses and Pharaohs of Ancient Egypt. As most of you know, I'm sure, my first children's book came out last year in 2019 and was all about Greek mythology, aimed at an age range of around 7 to 11 years old, and published by DK with illustrations by the incredible Katie Ponder. And both books are actually part of an ongoing series published by DK exploring lots of different mythologies from around the world. And there is a second book in the series which came out in 2020, which was on Norse mythology, written by Matt Ralphs, which is absolutely fantastic, would also recommend checking out, as well as illustrated by Katie Ponder. And lucky me has had the opportunity to work once again with Katie on Egyptian myths, because obviously antiquity is my speciality, and I absolutely adore writing for children, and in particular writing about mythology for children, making it accessible, bringing these myths to new readers, and also discussing the historical context and the people that believed in these myths and worshipped these myths in antiquity, because this is obviously very specifically dealing with ancient people. And I've basically spent a good chunk of 2020 working on this book, so I'm just incredibly excited for it to be released into the world next year, and I hope as many of you will enjoy it as have enjoyed Greek myths. Also, if you're interested, my favourite Egyptian myth is absolutely the myth of Hathor and the beer. If you know, you know. Next up is A Kata Woman by Nnedi Okorafor. So this is the third and final book in Nnedi Okorafor's trilogy, which began with A Kata Witch, and is a YA fantasy series about Sunny, an albino girl living in Nigeria who discovers that she is a witch, or in their culture, a leopard person. And in book one, she basically ends up as a member of a class of similar aged peers to her, another girl and 2 boys, who are learning about their craft from older leopard people in their community. But of course there is danger around every corner, and in book one it turns out that there's a serial killer hunting down leopard people. And I have read books 1 and 2 in the series, absolutely adored them, so of course I am super excited for the third and final installment. Initially I thought it was only going to be a duology, so since I finished book 2 and realised there was going to be a third one, I have been eagerly anticipating this book, and I'm so pleased it finally has a release date, which is incredibly soon at that, because it comes out on January 14th. A book by an author I haven't read previously but just sounds like a combination of so many of my favourite things I cannot wait for is Pandora by Susan Stokes Chapman. Now this book is a retelling or a reimagining, or even simply put, a tale inspired by the ancient Greek myth of Pandora, who was the first ever mortal woman created by the gods, but it is set in the 1800s, which I love. I love books set in the 1800s. I love books that deal with and retell Greek mythology, and I love Pandora. So I am so excited for this book. Oh wow, I've just realised I'm a complete and utter liar because it's set in 1799. That's so close to the 1800s. I was so close to getting that right, and you know what? I'm just going to keep my mistake in there. So it's set in London, 1979, and it's about Dora Blake, who is an aspiring jewellery artist who lives with her uncle in what used to be her parents' famed shop of antiquities. When a mysterious Greek vase is delivered, Dora is intrigued by her uncle's suspicious behaviour and enlists the help of Edward Lawrence, a young antiquarian scholar. Now I believe there's also elements of romance and mystery in this book which sound fantastic, plus thank you for it being a vase and not a box. Thank you, thank you. Oh, and before I forget, Pandora comes out on the 27th of January. Next up is a book very much aimed at adults because it is pure adult historical fantasy romance with, you know, layers of smut. At least if book one is anything to go by, but I am so excited for it to come out because it is the sequel to a book which I read very, very recently and was so shocked and appalled to realise book two was not already out. So I'm gonna have to like keep myself contained and controlled until the 25th of May, but it would be a lie to say this was not one of my most anticipated releases. And that is The Company of Fiends by Catherine Moon, book two in the Tempting Monsters series. So like I mentioned, this is very much a smutty adult romance novel set in the 1800s with a fantastical twist. In book one, we follow a young woman who is initially a maid, but she loses her position when the family she works for basically goes bankrupt and is offered a new position by their on-call GP effectively. It's the time when hysteria was like the big topic of conversation and doctors had a very specific way of treating it, which is his speciality. So she takes on this new position in a home for monstrous gentlemen. Now she has very insatiable appetite when it comes to the bedroom, which is exactly what is needed here. But beyond that, she also very much begins to fall in love with the world that she's introduced to and the men that she takes into her life, which include the Invisible Man, the equivalent of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, a vampire, a sphinx, and a golem. We have a little bit of everything and it is such good fun that of course I'm excited for book two. But more than that, there was also so much like background political upheaval left unanswered, you know, like the villain stuff, the villain side of the story has still so much more to be uncovered that I need to know what's going to happen. Like, what are the villains up to? What's going to happen in this world? What's going to happen to our characters? Although book two actually follows a new female protagonist who specifically works for this theatre troupe which specialise in theatre for this monstrous community and involving other monsters. So it's going to be really fun to have a new character as the focus, but I'm hoping we also get answers about things I'm curious about from book one, if that makes sense. So next up we have The Family Remains by Lisa Jewell, which is actually the sequel to The Family Upstairs. And I say actually because The Family Upstairs was a thriller novel which very much could have been read as a standalone, as I think a lot of thrillers are intended to be. Like, thrillers are not the genre in which I expect to find series, and I don't think many people were expecting a sequel to The Family Upstairs. However, there were elements of the story's ending which hinted at the potential for one. Not that one was necessary, but that one could happen, and it is. And I'm so excited because The Family Upstairs was one of my favourite books of 2021. It's now one of my favourite thrillers, and Lisa Jewell has become possibly my favourite thriller writer. I have so many more books of hers on my shelves. I've read more since reading The Family Upstairs, and of course I want to know what happens next. I think it's going to be so interesting to see how she develops these characters, the mystery and the plot surrounding them in a second book, and what we have to look forward to. In book one, we follow a young woman who has come to a certain point in her life. I can't remember exactly how old she is, maybe it's 25, and she has inherited a house from her biological parents who are both dead. So they died when she was still a baby in a suicide pact, and she was adopted, and it's now come to that age where she inherits their home, which is this like multi-million-dollar like mansion townhouse in Chelsea, London. But of course there's a lot of mystery surrounding this house, what happened exactly to her parents and what happened to her siblings who were never found, because she has two older siblings, and it was fantastic. So naturally I can't wait for book two, but don't want to mention anything about the plot because I don't want to spoil book one. On the topic of sequels, we have Silverborn by Jessica Townsend, book 4 in the Nevermore series. This is one of my favourite series at the moment, and it's a middle grade fantasy series which follows Morrigan Crow, a young girl who's fated to die on her 11th birthday. I feel like you've probably heard this pitch before, but instead of dying is actually whisked away to the magical world of Nevermore, where she is inducted into the Wondrous Society because she has this very special gift. Now, you don't know exactly what that gift is initially, so I won't spoil it for you, but these are some of the most captivating children's fantasy I think currently being released, and they are particularly a series which I think can be enjoyed by adults as well as children. If you want some of that nostalgia from your own childhood, if you're a fan of fantasy children's book as a child, then this may be your way back in, because it has so much depth and so many layers that I really do think it's for all ages, but can obviously also be enjoyed by its intended audience, which is the priority. I, however, love them. Like I said, I think they're so well written and so complex, so many interesting characters. I have loved following Morrigan along on her adventures, and I am desperate to see what comes next. We then have a book by an author I know many of you are big fans of, just as I am, and that is Book of Night by Holly Black, which is Holly Black's first ever adult novel. So Holly Black is particularly well known for writing children's and young adults fantasy novels. I'm a big fan. I love a lot of her stories and her novels. So naturally, the fact that she's bringing out an adult novel has me so pumped. Specifically, this book is about Charlie Hall, who has never found a lock she couldn't pick, a book she couldn't steal, or a bad decision she wouldn't make. She spent half her life working for gloamists, magicians, who manipulate shadows to peer into locked rooms, strangle people in their beds, or worse. Gloamists guard their secrets greedily, creating an underground economy of grimoires, and to rob their fellow magicians, they need Charlie. Now she's trying to distance herself from past mistakes, but going straight isn't easy. So yeah, I probably don't need to say any more than that, but I cannot wait for this book to come out. The next book on my list is actually a non-fiction title, which is Captives: How Rikers Island Took New York City Hostage by Jared Shanahan. So this is naturally a non-fiction book about Rikers Prison. So focusing in on Rikers and Rikers Island, this book looks at the history of New York and America's relationships with jails over the past 70 years and the sort of infamy that has evolved around Rikers. Specifically, it's described as a history of how the Rikers Island of today and the social order it represents came to be. And I have always felt that jails and prisons and the histories of jails and prisons is such an important avenue through which to examine politics and oppression within our modern society. And I've never read a book which focuses solely in specifically on one particular prison, but looking at its wider ramifications. So this one really appealed to me as a concept, and it's published by one of my favourite non-fiction publishers, who are Verso, and I've had such success with their non-fiction in the past that I really trust them when it comes to these kind of subjects, so I'll definitely be picking this up. Then last but not least, of course, I had to squeeze in one more Greek myth retelling, and that is Electra by Jennifer Saint. So some of you may know that Jennifer Saint's debut Greek myth retelling came out this past year and was all about Ariadne, and called Ariadne at that. One of the things in particular that really drew me to Ariadne and really had me excited about it was the fact that I've rarely seen a retelling of Ariadne, particularly one that's had so much press and so much attention. Like, it's not a myth that gets retold as much as others, like perhaps the Trojan War, which is all great and fine, but it's really nice to see these slightly less well-known myths get a chance, and these slightly less well-known women of mythology be granted a voice, at least from one other writer's perspective. And the same goes for Electra. Although there are so many ancient narratives of Electra, like there are multiple surviving plays about Electra from ancient Greece, I really haven't come encounter with many novels retelling Electra's story. So naturally I'm just super excited that Jennifer Saint decided to sit down and give Electra her time in the light. That, however, does bring me to the 10 books I'm probably most excited for coming out in 2022. It's really hard, like there are a lot of books I'm super excited for, and I may do some more TikToks just featuring a few more different books I'm looking forward to so that I get a chance to talk about them all. But just to keep it concise, those are the 10 that I thought you should all know about right here, right now. I hope you find this interesting. I know someone at least will probably ask, so I should mention that yes, the sequel to Flames of Albion, my fantasy novel, should be out next year in late autumn or early winter, but I don't have a confirmed date or pre-order links or even a title to share with you yet, so I'm just not going to say any more than yes, it should be out next year, and I hope you don't mind waiting to find out what is next in store for Adaria and her friends. Once again, a massive thank you to Book of the Month for sponsoring this video. Make sure to check them out in the link in the description box, because if this hasn't been enough exciting new releases for you, then being subscribed to Book of the Month is the perfect way to learn about new releases as they come out, because they often have books available which aren't even released yet, but you can have early copies of, which is super duper cool. But until next time, happy reading, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye everyone!